So, I finally caught up with Bridgerton Season 3, and I have only one thing to say. What a mess.
But you and my mess.
But it's a beautiful mess. It's rare that a piece of media can contain so many multitudes, so many contradictions, so many layers. Like an onion. Onions can be overpowering and spicy, but they can also be turned a beautiful golden brown and become sweet if you cook them with care. Bridgerton Season 3 is an onion that has been unequally cooked. Like the exterior appears caramelized and delicious, but the interior is still kind of raw and pungent. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that with a little more time, the entire onion can be sautéed to perfection. And that is what Bridgerton Season 3 needed. More time. Hi, my name is Suchi, and welcome back to my channel, where I talk about the stories that I love and that inspire me. And I love a good friends to lovers story arc. Even more so when it's a childhood friends to lovers arc. I think the growing up together aspect really adds a whole new level of flavor to the dish. It's the shared history, it's the growth. So when it was revealed that Bridgerton Season 3 would be polin season, I felt so alive. I think Colin and Penelope had such a build-up over the first 2 seasons, and given how Season 2 ended between them, I was absolutely seated for how their story would develop this time. So what are my thoughts on Polin's story this season? We'll get to that. There's just so much to unpack first, because there's so much going on in this season, which is the show's strength, but also its ultimate downfall. Like I said, multitudes. I almost don't even know where to begin, but I'm gonna try going down the list. Number 1, the ensemble unfolds. Depending on which character you were, Season 2 ended on either a sweet or sour note. If you were Kanthony, you were blissfully happy and married with your beautiful wedding that happened off-screen. More on that later. If you're Portia Featherington, you've just unwittingly girl-bossed your family out of a treacherous man's clutches. If you're Benedict, you've spent the entire season trying to find yourself, i.e. you went to art school and fooled around because you're rich and simultaneously unemployed. If you're Colin, you've had a laugh with your mates at your friend's expense at yet another tiresome ball and are off to jet set to the continent to take yet another gap year. If you're Eloise, you've just discovered your best friend was the one you've been trying to find the entire time, the one who betrayed your secret in front of the entire ton, and you're heartbroken. And finally, if you're Penelope, one of your best friends has discovered your secret to her ultimate displeasure, and the other has betrayed you in front of the entire ton. And you're heartbroken. Season 3 opens almost a year after Season 2 ends, with all of these loose threads still hanging, but for some reason the writers didn't feel like there was enough drama going on already. Like, clearly the existing storylines don't have enough substance to build an entire 8-episode season off of, so now, enter Francesca. Number 2, the absentee sister. For the record, I like Francesca as a character. I just don't understand why she had to turn up now and be given such a large amount of screen time. Because for the last 2 seasons, we've barely had any scenes with her, and she's always been in the background. And the rest of the time, she's nowhere to be found, because she's not even there. She's been in Bath the whole time, learning the piano with a mysterious aunt. She's a deadbeat sister in the nicest way possible. Francesca is super sweet and kind when we meet her in Season 3, but she has been entirely absent thus far. We don't know anything about her. So of course now we have to spend time understanding why she is the way she is. Why she'd rather play piano than talk to strangers at a ball, or why sitting in silence is the way to her heart. I think Francesca is a really interesting character, and I wish she'd been introduced in earlier seasons because she's really giving neurodivergent, gifted kid who just cannot words. Which is important representation for us socially awkward girlies who just want to stay home and do our fun little hobbies, but also who want to find love and belonging without ever interacting with people. She's so real for that. I think her relationship with John Sterling is unique in that she really did find someone to match her very specific freak, and seemingly in record time. And then they get married. But because it's not their season, the whole thing sort of plays out like you're pushing the fast forward button constantly. Because Colin and Penelope get all the additional screen time, right? Right? Francesca's whole conflict is that she's willing to accept a love that's more quiet and reserved rather than loud and dramatic, which is Violet's only blueprint for romance, but she eventually comes around. I do think Francesca and John's story was more rushed so that a new player can enter the game.
Michaela Sterling,
For those of you who don't know, in the books, John Sterling dies pretty early in Francesca's marriage, and she eventually marries his cousin Michael, who has been turned into Michaela in the show. I saw a lot of book fans be really upset about this little switch up, but since the books aren't good, I don't really care. Michaela Sterling gets a thumbs up from me. One other thing I'll say about the Bridgerton books is that all of the men are positively medieval, and there's a reason the show has deviated so much from the source material. Because they're all walking red flags in some form, and they really wouldn't have translated well as romance on screen if it was a word-for-word copy-paste. I mean, if we ignore the glaring consent issue in season 1, but I digress. Like, I clearly remember Michael in the books going, well, even if she doesn't marry me, maybe I can get her pregnant and she'll be forced to marry me. Yikes! So, going back to our onion analogy, Francesca's is pretty evenly cooked, if a little out of left field. Like, we threw in an extra onion on the pan because we didn't know we had an extra onion, and it'll expire immediately if we don't use it now. Number 3, the viscount who vanished. Kanthony was my favorite part about season 2. Their chemistry was off the charts, insane, barking mad, and after everything they went through, even if it was self-inflicted on their part, their happily ever after was hard-earned and well-deserved. Someone on Reddit did a screen time analysis and determined that Kate and Anthony's total screen time as a couple was only 15% of the entire runtime of the entire Bridgerton filmography. Simon and Daphne's screen time, by comparison, was at least 20%, and that was just in season 1, which then makes me, a Kanthony stan, feel poor and starved for content. I was never expecting a full-course meal from them in season 3, and indeed that's not what I was fed. But what little moments we got of them, I held onto for dear life, like a rat hoarding food for a long and cold winter. They arrive on screen in season 3 with their insane dynamic fully intact, and I could not be more happy for these crumbs. Like in every scene they're in, Anthony will not stop looking at his wife like she hung the stars in the sky. We don't really see them being Viscount and Viscountess in part 1. There's exactly one scene where they're in the study attempting to do paperwork, but that gets derailed real quick because they're horny fools in love. Television. And then they decide to extend their honeymoon in the first episode, and we don't see them again for another 4 episodes. And all this was a clever ploy to give Colin and Penelope more screen time, right? Right? To my horror, I thought Kanthony would be permanently spending their lives off screen after that, and sadly I was only partially wrong. I have to shout out this moment in episode 5. They're coming back from their honeymoon riding in a carriage, freshly pregnant, and Anthony is still looking at Kate like she hung the moon, and she just flatly goes, I hope you're thinking pure thoughts because we're literally about to see your family. In a direct juxtaposition of the night before, where a different Bridgerton brother was thinking the exact opposite of pure thoughts right before he saw his family. Poetic cinema. I like that we did get to see Kate being Viscountess, even if it was for just like 1 episode, where she hosts Polin's engagement ball. But I think I liked her being a big sister even better. Her short scene encouraging Eloise to talk to Penelope and Colin about her feelings, making sure Gregory gets to eat his favorite dessert, and best of all, her marital advice for Colin. All of these were so necessary, and I'm glad they were kept in, because it ties her past as an elder sister to her present as the lady of a large household with many younger siblings that need taking care of. Kanthony's advice to Colin before his wedding to Pen is top-notch.
You think our marriage is perfect?
Was it not?
I love a man that is so down bad. That's all I'm saying. Side note, I love that in every scene they're in together, Anthony is clutching Kate to him for dear life. Probably because he's afraid she'll threaten to leave for India again. Unfortunately, we don't really get to see much of them after that, because the writers ship both of them off to India this time. Because Anthony wants to see where Kate grew up and have their child be born there. Because he wants his kid to be cultured. Which I get. Their child is Desi. They can't forget their roots. I just wish I'd actually gotten to witness all of Kanthony's life milestones with my own 2 eyes. But when the ton needed them most, the Viscount and Viscountess vanished.
I love weddings.
Ours was perfect.
Well, I wouldn't know, because it happened off screen, just like their honeymoon, and now the birth of their child in India will be. Honestly, such a wasted opportunity. The fact that I won't get to see the whitest British man ever try eating saag paneer with garlic naan for the first time, or eating a mango. I would like a spin-off of Kanthony's misadventures in India, please. I would like to see it. Number 4, Cressida the Cunning. I like that we got a more in-depth look into Cressida Cowper and why she is the way she is. Would have been nice if it went somewhere though. Part 1 spends so much time explaining, through her new friendship with Eloise, that she grew up alone without any female friends. That lack of female companionship in her life has taught her to view other women on the marriage mart as competition rather than opportunities to form close bonds. This, along with her raging misogynist of a father, forced her to face society with teeth and claws bared, and unfortunately scared off both women and men, until she met Eloise. Cressida is so deeply lesbian coded, it's not even funny. She compares her attempts to befriend Eloise like that of a suitor trying to court a lady. I don't think I've seen her look at a man like that. It's just interesting. Unfortunately, that doesn't really go anywhere this season, because her insane father is forcing her to get married to a corpse. So when the queen offers a £5,000 reward to hunt down Whistledown, she's found her escape route by overhearing other people comment that if Whistledown is uncovered, and if she happens to be a young unmarried woman, she'll never secure a husband, because people don't want drama in their lives, they just want to read about it. Which is so real. Cressida's like, yes, this is my chance to permanently disqualify myself from ever having to attract a man ever again. I am Lady Whistledown, everybody. Gonna collect that sweet reward money from the queen and run off to Vienna so that I can be a lesbian in peace. The queen's like, not so fast, girly. You gotta prove that you're Whistledown, because all I sense behind those eyes is circus music. Basically, no one, not the queen, not even her own mother, thinks Cressida is clever enough to be Lady Whistledown. And Eloise is like, not this shit again. I am not helping you out of this one. Also, we are no longer friends. And, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions, her mom's like, read me what you wrote as Lady Whistledown. And it's just the essay that SpongeBob tried to write that one time.
Today I bring you much gossip from about the many lands, near and far, far and wide.
Just writing all the words while saying nothing at all. Incidentally, this is how the actual writing process goes. It just is. Her mom's like, okay, sweetie, I'll take it from here. And writes a coherent but clearly fake column, which Penelope immediately discredits, and this forces Cressida to make the first clever move in her life, which was talking to a poor person who works in the printing press. And that's all she needs to uncover Whistledown, clearly. Moral of the story, don't ignore the working class. We know too much. So Cressida doesn't have to be Whistledown. She can just threaten to uncover Penelope in exchange for double the queen's reward money, and then run away to the continent to live out her lesbian dreams. Penelope is too much of a girl boss though, so this doesn't end up working out, tragically. Cressida Cowper is a villain that never gets redeemed, even though the first half of season 3 hints otherwise. She ends the season in literally the same place she began, friendless and unmarried, except with the added flavor of being shipped off to a weird relative in Wales. Her story goes nowhere, so it's a mystery to me why they even spent so much time developing her in the first place. But at the very least, she was there to serve. One thing I appreciate about Cressida is that she clearly doesn't care what other people think. If I want to wear hair bows made literally out of hair, I will. If I want to wear a crystal chandelier on my head, I will. If I want to wear balloon sleeves that could double as miniature umbrellas, I will. Cressida's job is just camp, and we just have to accept that. Number 5, the Tons 2019 Met Gala obsession. Now, to be completely fair, Bridgerton has never been the paragon of historical accuracy. Aside from the racially blind casting choices, the costuming department has never screamed Regency era. It's really just shouted Met Gala the entire time, but never more so than season 3. The women were always sporting bold eyeshadow looks and false lashes, but we really must highlight the differences between the first 2 seasons and season 3 because these stylistic decisions need to be studied. Because why is nearly every single female character looking like they're wearing every single Pat McGrath palette at once on their faces? I honestly feel like most of the other characters' hair and makeup this season has taken a turn for the worse. Penelope obviously is excluded from this conclusion because look at her. Ethereal. Which makes me think that their strategy to make Pen's glow up stand out even more was just to make other characters wear unflattering makeup and outfits. Look at Kate, for example. Last year she wore jewel tones that complemented her skin tone, and her gowns were more heavily embellished without looking tacky. And while she clearly wore lashes, the rest of her makeup was toned down so that her look felt more natural and balanced. This season they've filled her brows for no reason, while still keeping her thick lashes and giving her a ton of face makeup. Like, I can almost see the layers of eyeshadow and foundation and blush and highlight. It's too much. I feel like I'm drowning in a Sephora aisle just looking at her face. Also, I need to point out this outfit. It's so big on her that she looks like a coat hanger. This was the one gown that she looked good in this season. It's meant to look like a sari, but make it regency, and I think that's pretty cool. I talked about Cressida's looks already, but what is this? Only Cressida knows. Generally speaking, the costumes this season are comically garish, even though the fabrics making up the garments are really pretty. It's a unique talent, creating something so hideous out of beautifully promising ingredients. To be really painfully honest, the only people who pull off these more out there looks are the Featheringtons, because they have the outstanding personalities to match. We'll get back to this later. I also need to know who Penelope's nail tech is, because they're clearly the best in the ton. Just look at those tips. I know those nails are there because Nicola was filming Big Mood at the same time as season 3, and it would have been too hard to keep putting them on and taking them off, but it's just funnier to imagine nail techs existing in this universe. Like, somehow they'd have a UV lamp to set gel nail polish, but also they don't have toilets yet. And finally, I cannot end this section without mentioning the Queen's wig. There's a whole swan lake on her head. Somehow this wig encompasses the entire universe. I don't know how, I don't know why. It's not physically possible, yet here we are. I kid you not, this wig is the best thing Bridgerton has ever given me. Nothing will top this. Might as well end the video right here. But I won't because I'm not done yapping yet. Number 6. The Lost Boy. Bridgerton has a Benedict problem, in that the writers are literally the Finding Nemo fish here. They don't know what to do with him to a comical degree. He's the second son and the second eldest Bridgerton child, so he's not first in line to inherit the throne. The throne. Can you imagine this man running any establishment, let alone a whole country? I can't because I've never seen him do any work. That's not to say he's not capable. I think he's capable. I just don't think the writers do. We got one throwaway line that he ran the estate well while Anthony was on his honeymoon, but of course we never saw this. It all happened off screen, and that's all there is to say on that. Benedict really shines in his scenes with his siblings. Like, this is a family man through and through. He would go to war for them. I particularly like when he's beefing with the two youngest Bridgertons over silly goofy things like cards or chocolate macarons. He's just so torn up over losing biscuits to a couple of 10-year-olds, as though they can't just have Cook make more. There's just the last macarons left in Britain. Or his quiet moments on the swing with Eloise. It's just the two of them being confused in the moonlight together every season, and I think that's beautiful. In a better written show, they'd focus on him finding a purpose as the second son and spare. But no, his arc so far has been seduce the dressmaker, go to art school, seduce the nude model, go to a gay club but no homo, no longer attend art school because I feel imposter syndrome as a nepo baby, get talked into returning to art school but never bring it up on screen again. And finally at season 3, bed a rich widow, and for the grand finale, have a threesome, and be a little homo this time. This has got to be the world's longest threesome, because like the rest of his family's name is being dragged through the mud by Cressida's whistle-down drama for like 3 days straight, and he's been in bed with these people the entire time. Just casually leaving the family he loves so much, just the societal wolves. He's not going to war for them today. He's booked and busy. I have to laugh. By the way, this is not me trying to diminish his bisexual awakening, which can be a life-altering realization, but it obviously wasn't for Benedict, because after their threesome, the widow's like, Benny, I'm starting to catch feelings for you. And he's like, nope, I'm out. So he's back to square one again. He has no purpose, no love interest, and no direction, just like when he started. This onion hasn't even left the chopping board. It's just raw and uncooked. But it's okay, because he's got jokes.
Oh,
Benedict, dear.
It's hinted that next season there's a masquerade ball coming up. You book nerds know what that means. Save us, Sophia. Save us. Or Sophio if you're a guy. That's okay too. Number 7. Featheringtons are forever. The Featheringtons are without a doubt the best family in the Bridgerton cinematic universe. Who else can give us gems like this?
When he inserts himself.
Inserts himself? Inserts himself where?
That whole side plot of Prudence and Philippa not knowing mechanics of marital relations, shall we say, is peak comedy. This is television. The Featheringtons are proof that side characters are important and can be really compelling when the writing is competent. Like, their presence may be smaller in terms of the overall plot, but in every season they've added so much dimension to the show. They're not just there to take up valuable screen time, like the Mondridges. We'll get to that later. Portia's arc is unironically my favorite, because she starts out the show as someone obsessed with self-image and how her family is seen in society, and like all women in this universe, has grown up within the confines of patriarchy. When her husband dies, she becomes the head of the family, the final boss. Even after her daughters marry, she's the one calling the shots, not their husbands. When the safety of her family's finances is threatened by the duplicitous cousin Jack, she devises a whole scheme to blackmail him into running back to the Americas with his tail between his legs. Her power. Period. Portia has been girlbossing ever since her husband's death, but she doesn't realize it until season 3. Like, sis, you're still so convinced that only a man can provide true security, even though you're the one who's been protecting your family the whole time, and honestly doing a decent job at it, all things considered. Like, you got 2 of your daughters married to respectable men. You've managed to keep the tons investment money without them realizing it. You had a document forged so that all that has to be done to keep your estate within the family is for your daughters to have a son. None of this would have been possible if Portia actually was the woman she thinks she has to be. Meek, docile, and looking for strength in men instead of herself. I love finding out Penelope's alter ego is what drives her to realize how much she'd been downplaying herself and her daughters. Like, seeing how Penelope wielded power from her quill helped her to let go of some of her own internalized misogyny and see her daughters for the gifts that they are. Maybe the real Lady Whistledown was the family we healed along the way. There's just something really beautiful about the way the Featheringtons go from a family that tears each other down to one that uplifts each other, bugs and all. Long live House Featherington. Number 8. Eloise the Fickle. Eloise Bridgerton wants to change the world. She wants to uplift the plight of women and save them from having the dull futures of simply being a rich man's wife. So she's like a girl's girl, right? Because she wants women's rights. No! Being a girl's girl means that you're there for the women in your life. Eloise Bridgerton is not that. She is angry at Penelope for being Lady Whistledown and ruining her last season. But honestly, her anger seems overly inflated here because society forgot all about her ruin literally a week later. It's not like Whistledown's expose scared off any potential suitors or friends, because Eloise moved on with Cressida and the other debutantes this season. I get that her anger is probably from the fact that Pen kept such a big secret from her, more than anything else, but Eloise brings up being ruined a weird amount of times, and it just doesn't make any sense, because it didn't have any lasting impact on her or her place in the social sphere. So fine, she's brokenhearted at Pen's betrayal, so she's decided to move on and start a friendship with Cressida. But when Cressida is forced into marriage to a ridiculously geriatric man, Eloise is too caught up in the fact that Penelope is marrying her brother to care about her friend's plight. Like, your friend is being forced into being essentially a brood mare against her wishes. I don't know, isn't this the kind of thing that should be making your blood boil? As someone who cares deeply about women having a voice and a choice in the world? But no, Eloise just goes, damn, that's crazy, bro. Season 3 writers, what have you done to my girl? Like, she's shocked, but we don't see her rallying to her friend's side at all. Even when Cressida tells her she plans to run off to Vienna and escape the shackles of marriage, Eloise just goes, I just can't right now. Can you believe that two-faced bitch is marrying my brother? And that he didn't even tell me he was in love with my best friend? Just completely not paying any attention to Cressida's frankly serious situation whatsoever. Way to be supportive, Eloise. Just don't ever join the suffragettes. They need people who are actually going to walk the walk instead of just yapping about women's rights. She's such a non-existent friend to both Cressida and Penelope. She accuses Penelope of being judgmental as Lady Whistledown, but then proceeds to judge her in return and immediately assumes that Penelope only befriended her all those years ago to get to Colin. I also want to point out here that Penelope and Eloise seem to have switched places this season. For once, Penelope is attracting all the attention, and Eloise is standing on the sidelines at every ball, like an insipid wallflower, if you will. She judges Cressida too, and assumes she spilled the tea on Colin teaching Penelope how to attract a husband, but in fact it was Eloise all along. Eloise later abandons Cressida to be married to a literal zombie. She tells Penelope to stop being Lady Whistledown when she marries Colin, all while refusing to acknowledge that Whistledown is Penelope's life's work, her calling as a woman, entirely outside her worth as her brother's wife. But when the Bridgerton family's standing is once again threatened by the same friend she abandoned, Eloise turns around and tells Pen to become Lady Whistledown again, to save her family from ruin. Like, girl, pick a side. Be so for real. It's only when Eloise herself and her family is threatened that she supports Penelope being Lady Whistledown. Like, that's not being a girl's girl. That's being selfish. Eloise and Penelope do eventually make up, because Pen is a pure being who loves Eloise and would do literally anything to make her happy. It's nice to see them finally being the sisters that they are. We get a sliver of acknowledgement from Eloise that being Whistledown is important to Penelope. Would have also liked to see that she wasn't there for her friends, though. Self-awareness is a gift. Let Eloise Bridgerton have it. And at the end of the season, she's still determined to change the world, starting first by escaping London society. She leaves for Scotland with Francesca and John, ready to see the world and be a part of it. Prayer circle that she actually gets to do something impactful next season, instead of just wishing aloud to anyone who'll listen. Instead of being a massive hypocrite by superficially wanting better for women, but also not supporting her female friends at all. This onion is overcooked. A tad burnt. We need a fresh start in a new frying pan. Number 9. Violet's evergreen garden. I don't really have anything to say here other than let Violet tend to her garden. If it must be with her best friend's brother, then so be it. It's less weird than her best friend screwing her dad. Fingers crossed we get to see Viscountess Kate return from the war, i.e. India, so that Violet can retire with her boy toy in peace. Number 10. The Columnist and Mr. Worldwide. One fine spring day, a boy fell off his horse into the mud, and a little girl named Penelope Featherington fell in love. A few years later, Colin Bridgerton also fell in love, but harder. Here's a fun little game. Let's sum up the tale of Colin and Penelope using only AO3 trope tags. We have the falling for my best friend's older brother. We have childhood friends to lovers, neighbors to lovers, epistolary romance, she fell first but he fell harder, and my personal favorite of the bunch, not actually unrequited love. Did season 3 deliver on these tropes for our two ink-crossed lovers? Let's get into it. Penelope was a child when the Featheringtons first moved to London from their country estate. They didn't know anyone in Mayfair at the time, so Portia takes the girls out to promenade in the park in the hopes of meeting people and to show off, because this is Portia we're talking about. A strong gust of wind lifts Penelope's yellow hat and smacks right into the face of one Colin Bridgerton. He's just not expecting that, so he just falls off his horse in surprise and lands in the mud. Penelope goes over to express her deepest apologies, but Colin just laughs and tells her the fault was all his. She's fully expecting this boy to be angry, but he's just all smiles, just fully dimpling up at her in the sunlight. It's a very sweet meet cute. Of course she fell in love right there. Kindness is a rare quality in rich boys. From that point on, the Bridgertons become a constant in Penelope's life. At some point, she's introduced to Eloise, and they become instant friends. Colin is a good friend to her, but he tells her at several points in the first 2 seasons that that's all he is to her. Just a really good friend. A really good friend who inspires him to write about his travels, whose letters from home bring a smile on his face, who has always been caring and constant, who assures him that he'll find his true purpose one day. And then he tells her that he'll always look after her. Just really good friend things between an unmarried man and woman. Nothing to see here. But then that same night, he also tells the Ton that he would never dream of courting Penelope Featherington. The very thought of it is just outrageous. Colin, my guy, that's not very good friend behavior. Penelope overhears this and her heart is broken. The man she thought was her friend, whom she's loved ever since she was a child, has publicly humiliated her without even breaking a sweat. So naturally, she gives him the silent treatment. Colin leaves to travel, and his letters to her go unanswered. And that's when he realizes something is off, because he looks forward to her letters the most, and they're no longer coming to him. We don't see this in action, by the way. This is just told to us in hindsight once he's back in England. There are a few things with Polin's story that I wish we'd been shown rather than told through dialogue. Important things are explained to the audience that should have been flashbacks. This couldn't, in fact, have been an email. The meeting was necessary. unnecessary. You should have gotten a scene of Colin in a lavender field in France somewhere, asking the harried innkeeper who not so secretly hates the British if he's gotten any letters from Featherington House. And the innkeeper going, "No, now ferme la and eat your onion soup." We also didn't get a flashback scene of Polin's childhood meet cute, which is crazy to me because it would have added so much color to their interactions as adults falling in love. Instead, we are told all of this by Colin in a scene that frankly goes by way too quick. In fact, most of the Polin scenes in season 3 go by so fast that if you blink, you miss it. Why? Because the Mondriches still exist. And for some reason, their storyline is still being continued, even though their main plotline of the challenges of opening a gentleman's club has already been resolved. I just don't know what they're still doing here and taking up screen time because their story has no relevance at all to the Bridgertons. In fact, they're so unconnected to the main storyline that if you take them out, literally nothing changes at all. The same Reddit user I mentioned earlier did the math and yeah, for a couple that supposedly had this much build-up, Colin and Penelope have only had as much screen time as a couple as Kate and Anthony. 99 minutes across 3 whole seasons? Calling season 3 Polin season is honestly a misnomer here. It was more like keeping up with the tone, with a side of Colin and Penelope, which honestly kind of sucks because it makes you feel like you're watching the SparkNotes summary of their love story rather than the full thing. Having the flashback scenes wouldn't even have been out of place for Bridgerton, because we had them in season 2 with Anthony, and they really helped tell the story of why he is the way he is, and why he didn't want to fall in love before Kate stormed into his life. Seeing with our own 2 eyes how Colin and Penelope met and grew up together would have helped us better contextualize their relationship and how it formed over time. It's crazy to think that we traded all of that in for some throwaway lines of exposition and pointless scenes of the most boring family in the ton. I'm sorry, I know I keep harping on about this. This is the last thing I'll say about the Mondriches. They throw this ball because they're society people now, and the queen comes over and she's like, "This is a really boring party." As she should, because she's right. And Mrs. Mondrich nods to a servant, who then opens the giant centerpiece in the middle of the room, unveiling the grand showstopper, a paper accordion. I just can't, yeah, it looks nice, but it doesn't do anything. All it does is expand and is the same pattern as the walls. It's not a moment like the bugs, but it wishes it was. The queen's kind of impressed, but I'm honestly just confused. It's not like the Mondriches made this with their own 2 hands. They clearly just paid someone to create it. Anyway, Colin returns to England a changed man. He looks rugged and handsome, like a gentleman pirate. He's Mr. Worldwide. He's been to 17 cities. He's really confused as to why Penelope is ignoring him. She keeps her remarks short and terse and keeps walking off every time he comes near, which is rather perplexing because I literally became Prince Charming when I was away. I've had relations with so many women. While Colin was on his grand tour of spreading STDs throughout Europe, he made a decision that he was going to come back a man so unlike the boy everyone knew, someone who nobody can ignore, even as a 3rd son. I feel it's because nobody paid attention to him the last time he came back from his travels, nobody except Penelope anyway, that he feels like he has to reinvent himself so much, like he had to go do edgy things off screen. Edgy being screwing every woman on the continent, apparently. He had to be edgy to get people to notice him, which is honestly kind of silly because, as Penelope points out, the Bridgertons are always at the center of attention. Unfortunately, this suave new character Colin has invented to fit in doesn't impress Penelope, nor me either, but that's besides the point. She calls him out on how his callous comments last year really hurt her feelings and her prospects on the marriage mart, and that she never thought a friend could be so cruel. She writes as much in Whistledown, which is so funny because she's basically calling him fake in front of the entire ton, as she should. All of this makes Colin's tummy feel bad. Penelope not answering any of his letters literally ruined his world tour. Now she doesn't even want to be around him because he's been a terrible friend. Penelope, meanwhile, is determined to get married so that she doesn't have to live under Portia's thumb, and changes her whole look to attract suitors. And she looks absolutely stunning. I really love her new style. It's very old Hollywood with the soft waves. The blue and teal colors she wears match her skin tone and her eye color really well, because those citrus tones were not doing it for her. She just looks incredible in every outfit she's in. It's so crazy to me that a woman that looks like that was overlooked by the ton for so long, even more so because her fuller figure is literally the ideal beauty standard for the Regency period. In that era, being curvy meant you had plenty to eat and were rich enough to afford not to have to work or even lift a single finger if you didn't want to. You paid someone to do that for you. But again, this is Bridgerton, so historical accuracy only applies when the writers feel like it. So Colin goes to make amends and offers to help her find a husband by giving her private lessons, because that is what a good friend would do, obviously. The lesson scenes are so funny because they're essentially just Penelope being Pookie and Colin taking notice of just how Pookie she is. It's interesting to see Colin publicly going out of his way to attend to Penelope, considering the way he declared only last year to the same public that he would never court her, but only to make sure his lessons are sticking. No other reason. After all, a courtship is where two people get to know each other better in a public setting, where they seek each other out at every function. They spend time together, they laugh together, and oh, wait a minute. I like that she finds his super secret diary and reads the risque passages from his travels, but instead of being shy and awkward about it, she asks him to let her read it. Because this is the one area in her life that she's mastered completely. The art of the written word. I wanted more on this topic than what we got, because writing is something specific that ties Colin and Penelope together, other than their childhood friendship. Their letters to each other are what strengthened their bond, so I wanted them to explore that aspect of their relationship more. I wanted a flashback to them exchanging letters while Colin was away in the past, or maybe in the present Colin could give Penelope his journals, and she helps edit them to be published before they even begin their real courtship. I know Penelope offers to do this after they're engaged, and it does happen after they're married, but we never see it on screen because it's cut for time. The Mondrian plot was just so compelling. The Ton eventually finds out about Colin's lessons to Penelope because Eloise, free women Bridgerton, can't keep her mouth shut. And she's forced to publish it in Whistledown in what's probably the meanest article she's ever written about herself. Pen puts herself on blast in front of the entire Ton because she's going through it. She can't seem to attract any suitors, so it must be because she's deficient in some fundamental way. Totally not because Colin is unconsciously looming over her shoulder at every ball. She goes home defeated, ready to accept her fate as a spinster, and she would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for that meddling Colin Bridgerton. And here marks the beginning of Colin's epic mental breakdown over Penelope Featherington, just a slip and slide into increasing levels of insanity from this moment on. Penelope is doomed to be alone forever, so she asks her friend one last favor. She asks Colin to kiss her, because she'll never know what it feels like to be loved like that, and for all she knows, she could die tomorrow. My heart honestly broke a little when she said it didn't have to mean anything. She just automatically assumed that he was that disgusted by her. And it breaks Colin's heart too, because a man never denies his good friend anything. So he gives her a little kiss. Oh, okay. Not a little kiss then. I love that she's just rocked his entire world off its axis here. Like, he just looks so wrecked. And she's just like, thank you, bye now, and just runs off into the sunset. Colin Bridgerton would never know peace again. He is a hot mess after this. He's just lying awake every night, shook to the core. He keeps seeing her in his dreams. Very normal, good friend behavior. One night, he wakes, strange look on his face, pauses, then says, "You're my best friend." And you knew what it was. He is in love. He keeps glaring at Lord Debling as he tries to court Penelope in a poorly concealed jealous rage. He can't even visit his favorite brothel in peace because that kiss is weighing on his soul. He doesn't even enjoy hanging out with the Ton's favorite toxic boy band. Let's talk about these brothel scenes, okay? I get that they're there to establish that he is not the innocent boy he once was, that he's trying to be someone he's not, but it just feels tiring to watch yet another leading man be a rake. We already got rakes in the form of Simon and Anthony. Benedict is one too, but on his end, I feel like it's just a bad joke at this point. I cannot take anything they do with Ben seriously. I don't know, I just wanted Colin to be a little different. And they were setting him up to be different in the previous seasons. Making him exactly like his brothers just feels like lazy writing. And one brothel scene was cringe enough. Why even put in a second brothel scene when you could have him suffering alone like the best of Regency heroes? I crave the yearning for his lady. That is what Regency is all about. It's about the tension, the build-up. I wanted him to pine pathetically for longer than like a few short scenes. But at least Colin's yearning was loud and very public. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Anyone with functioning eyeballs could see how much he wanted her, as opposed to Penelope, who quietly pined after him for 2 seasons, but was ready to accept that he would always friend-zone her. Like she had made her peace with that. Colin, on the other hand, was ready to start biting people if he couldn't have Penelope. He's just an absolute shambles all the time. Like in this scene where he's just speaking to her for the first time after their kiss. He's just so in love, he has no idea what to say. Meanwhile, Penelope is like, we can't continue our lessons. Also, I still want to find a husband, so we can't be seen together. Which effectively breaks his heart. Also, the balloon scene, Penelope's like, pretend you're looking for sweets so no one suspects we're talking together. And his face just falls off a cliff. I like to think that it's because even now, even after their kiss, she still thinks he's embarrassed by her in some way. Like she still thinks that he'll never see her the way she sees him. Which is blatantly not true. But it's still funny to see how sad he gets watching her succeed with Lord Debling. Things come to a head though when Colin is sitting with the Tun's toxic boy band and they're all like, tell us of your adventures with women on your semester abroad. He's like, no, I want to think about Penelope. Also, you guys are fake as hell and I'm tired of pretending I belong in your boy band. I'm out. Good for him. About damn time. I think Colin came to this conclusion relatively early on, but didn't want to admit it. Like when the Tun found out he was helping Penelope, several people, including the Mondriches, in perhaps the only scene in which they're actually useful, they told him that what he was doing was honestly very noble and kind. Even Penelope thanks him for his help in securing Lord Debling, which helps him remember that kindness is his best quality, and he shouldn't try to snuff it out like most of the other men of the Tun do. Violet also tells him this, but she also is like, you've always put others before yourself. And sis, this is not Antony you're talking to. This is your third son who's taken a gap year literally every single year since the show began. Be serious now. While Colin is having a meltdown over her, Penelope is also suffering. She secures Lord Debling, a vegetarian who loves animals more than people, and presumably will love them more than his future wife, because he intends to travel to faraway lands for many years to do his conservation work. So he essentially wants his wife to be his estate manager while he's away. A lot of people were like, Pen should marry Lord Debling instead of Colin. He's rich, he's handsome, he likes how refreshingly honest she is. But the thing about Penelope is that she's never been honest about who she really is. She hides the whistledown part of herself from everyone. And marrying Lord Debling wouldn't change that. She would always remain in the shadows because her husband won't be around to challenge her to be anything more. And that's another issue. Penelope has dreamed of love and companionship ever since she was young, because she never had that with the Featheringtons growing up. Her family largely ignored her, and when they did give her attention, they did it to make fun of her. Not sure how she's supposed to have any relationship with her husband when he's disappearing into the wilderness for years at a time. I think the scene where Lord Debling gifts her a plant sums up the potential of their married life pretty well, because Pen doesn't care for nature at all, and he either doesn't know that about her, or doesn't care, and that's how they would be together. Two strangers living a world apart, married on paper, but never in their hearts. Penelope wants a husband who can be a lover and also her best friend. Enter one Colin Bridgerton. So Colin scares Lord Debling off with the sheer force of his yearning, and Pen is upset. And for good reason, because he's ruined her only chance at securing a good match. I like that she roasts him in that carriage, point blank telling him that Lord Debling ran off because for some preposterous reason, he thinks Colin has feelings for her, which is so beyond Penelope's wildest fantasies. And Colin just goes, but I do have feelings for you. And she's like, shook, but we're friends. And he's damn near about to start crying because he thinks he's been friend-zoned for the first time in his life. It hurts, doesn't it, to be the tree instead of the axe? But of course she feels the same. She's always felt that way. The carriage scene is so funny because the windows are completely open and the drivers unintentionally had VIP front row seats to everything those freaks were doing in there. I simply must point out Colin's facial expression here because, Luke, girly, what are you doing? Close your mouth. Why is it open like a fish? Who told you to do that? But this was sweet. He wants to wife her so bad, and she just wasn't expecting it. She wasn't expecting to be this happy. Also, this scene where he's putting on her clothes again with just the 2 fingers. You gonna wash your hands before you go hug your family? No? Okay. The entire Bridgerton brood is so happy at their engagement, other than Eloise, who threatens Penelope that if she doesn't tell Colin that she's Whistledown, then she will. Things move pretty quickly after that, though I did like that Antony noticed how quickly they got engaged and basically considers dueling his own brother to protect Penelope's honor. I like seeing the Bridgertons rally around Penelope. It's nice to see her loved. Especially when Portia finds out about their engagement and tries to take Penelope to task, but Colin is just having none of it. We like seeing a man stand up for his woman, and clearly so does Penelope. She's so shook because no one has ever stood up for her like that. Not even Eloise. She spent an entire lifetime fighting for people to respect her, and him protecting her like that is just something she's never had. Which then leads us to the mirror scene. In terms of sex scenes, this is one of the longer ones we've gotten so far, but it's played with enough tension and emotion that it doesn't really drag. The string version of Ariana Grande's POV was honestly a very fitting musical backdrop here because it really matched the theme of them seeing the good qualities in each other when no one else did. I love the look on Penelope's face here. Like she's about to eat some really delicious food, but doesn't know if she can fit it all in her stomach. Get your minds out of the gutter. Although they've clearly still got some jokes because Colin's like, this may hurt. I'll go slow, but then proceeds to just slam into her. Colin, be gentle with her. She's just a little lady, only 2 apples tall. Do not try that at home, kids. Unfortunately, though, Colin and Penelope's development in part 2 is a study in contradictions. On the one hand, we have compelling moments like the mirror scene and heartfelt declarations of love where Colin swears to always protect Pen and look out for her, to be her biggest supporter. I like that he admits to her that he did not feel worthy of her love, even before he finds out that she's Whistledown, because as Lady Danbury says, all she needed to get him to love her was to be herself. But of course, no marriage works without both parties being completely honest with each other, and when Colin finds out his bride is Lady Whistledown, this is where their relationship kind of goes off the rails. Colin is angry, understandably. Pen has been lying to him the whole time, but she doesn't get so much as a word in edgewise. She never gets to explain why she had to do the things that she did. And when there is an opening for her to do so, all she says is, I love you. But like really forcefully so he gets the message. This is kind of awkward because he's just lobbing all these accusations at her and she's just standing there taking it. It's almost like the writers were at a loss with what to have her say other than that she really loves him, which to be fair makes him fold immediately, but he's still angry with her. So he's just furiously kissing her against a wall in public because again, these two are a pair of absolute freaks. But their argument never really resolves. It just kind of continues to marinate. This is the kind of miscommunication trope that never works for me because it's just so forced. Nothing truly is preventing them from having a conversation. They just don't talk because that's what the showrunners want to do with the plot. Like this scene where he confronts Eloise about not telling him Penelope was Whistledown. Eloise goes, yeah, but she hasn't written anything bad about us recently. And Colin's like, are you forgetting she called me a fake bitch? But sir, like, you literally were being a fake bitch, though? It's not like she was making that up. You yourself admitted that to the toxic boy band earlier this season. Again, self-awareness is a precious gift. Even as they get married, in what is otherwise a beautiful wedding scene, it's clear that the writers didn't know how to resolve their conflict. We see Colin enthusiastically taking Penelope as a wife, but he's still reserved and doesn't want to be intimate with her. The duality of man. And even after the Queen interrupts their wedding and threatens the Bridgertons to uncover Whistledown, they still can't seem to have a discussion that makes any sense at all. He tells her that she should stop being Lady Whistledown, but she hits right back and tells him that this is her life's work, and it's one of the few things she has that is hers alone. That as a man, he can never understand what it is to be a woman and have no voice in the world. This should be a moment of epiphany for him, or even a shred of understanding to cross his face, because he knows how alone Penelope has felt before. But in a bizarre twist, we get none of that. He just goes, well, I can't accept that. Sorry. I don't know, it's just awkward and doesn't flow within the context of this conversation. It's like what she said went in one ear and out the other. He's not really hearing what she has to say. Honestly, kind of a running theme in her relationship with both Colin and Eloise. It's not really that fun, it just gets annoying after a while. Colin doesn't even let Pen speak after they find out Cressida is trying to blackmail them for a huge sum.
I merely wanted to be honest with you.
It is not up to you what we do. If Miss Cowper spreads this gossip...
Oh yeah, this just screams romance. Although I love that she gagged her whole family by revealing that she actually did have enough to pay her. Just being secretly loaded this entire time. Iconic. Colin takes it upon himself to talk Cressida out of blackmailing his wife, which on one hand is sweet of him because he is making good on his vow to protect Pen, but on the other he's just failing spectacularly at it. Colin is charming and a pretty face, but having street cred is not one of his qualities. He's the beauty, she's the brains, and she's also the beauty. ¿Por qué no los dos? Colin tries to sway Cressida by going, my wife did all this so she could feel less alone. Haven't you felt alone? Well, you shouldn't, because your family will always be there for you. But Cressida's like, well, my father's a bitch, so jot that down. So no, they won't be there for me. You owe me double now for wasting my time. Also, you're jealous of your wife's accomplishments as a writer. She clocked him. That's that on that. So yeah, Colin, baby boy, you tried, but let the professionals handle this, okay? Trying to understand Colin in part 2 is honestly some mental gymnastics. He married Penelope even after knowing she's Whistledown, promises to be there for her, clearly still loves her, but also refuses to sleep with her. Even after she's devised a plan to reveal herself as Whistledown on her own terms, even after she's resolved to fix all that she's done, when she asks him why he still won't touch her with a 10-foot pole, he's like, I don't know. Something's stopping me. Okay, so the writers, yet again, just didn't know what to do here. Got it. If I'd been in that writer's room, Colin would still be angry, but he'd give her the space to speak her mind. You know, because he's sensitive and empathetic, like Violet established earlier, like the show established earlier. We'd have more scenes of them coming back together with a better understanding of each other as fellow writers, because they'd actually have a meaningful conversation on the subject. Basically, we would get Lord Whistledown in some shape or form. Penelope's development is given a little more care, which I'm grateful for. She goes from nearly giving up her claim to Whistledown to simply be Colin's wife, to being both Lady Whistledown and Colin's wife. Marriage can change your last name, but it should never change your whole identity. Although she didn't get the chance to explain herself to Colin, she did muster up the courage to step out of the shadows. I like that she didn't want Colin's money to pay for her mistakes. I like that she personally funded the ball her sisters desperately wanted, but let her mom take all the credit for it, all with a smile. It shows that she's matured. She wants to make the people around her happy, rather than tearing them down. She's going to use her powers for good now. She isn't going to hide behind her quill anymore. I know some people felt like her big reveal to the ton was underwhelming, and maybe it was, but only in terms of their reaction to her being Whistledown. Like, that room was silent as the grave. Until the bugs. Philippa Finch, Sister of the Year. Pen takes back her identity on her own terms, and she'll bear whatever consequences that come with grace. That's growth. Even if one of those consequences is losing her husband. I like that the second she brings up an annulment, he's just beyond devastated at the prospect. He was down bad, crying at the gym. I admit, even with my issues with Colin, his final confession of love is what it's all about. He finally sees all of her, Whistledown and all. It's just funny the way he says it.
You are her.
Really? I didn't realize. But here's the part that I latch on to. The part where he tells her that even if the only thing he ever does in life is loving a woman like her, then that's a life well spent. He thought he was jealous of her, but really he just wanted to be around her. And that's all he ever wanted. I'm gonna need a moment. And then it's babies ever after for Colin and Penelope. I love that their son was born around the same time as his cousins, implying that Penelope had been pregnant basically the entirety of part 2, ever since the mirror scene. She really was ready to annul her marriage and be a boss-ass single mother if she had to be. Those Bridgerton genes clearly don't mess around. Suddenly Violet having like 8 children makes so much sense. I also love that Colin and Penelope won the succession war. Their son will be crowned the next Lord Featherington. Her sisters aren't even bothered by this, though, because they believe in girl power now. Their daughters will be strong, independent women who won't need no man. These are the same women who, earlier this season, were praying not to have daughters, because daughters steal your beauty and can't inherit castles. A+ character development. Who is doing it like the Featheringtons, honestly? I'm being so serious. And this is how we end the tale of Colin and Penelope as they lean in for a kiss, framed against the window Penelope had spent so long looking out, dreaming for a life full of love. But now she doesn't have to dream any longer. It's her reality. Signed, Penelope Bridgerton, society columnist extraordinaire. My girl really got everything she ever wanted. Her guy, her career, her fame. We simply must stand. So, to summarize, in terms of how well these onions browned in the pan, some parts are a little undercooked, and other parts are a little too burnt. But overall, the onions will be flavorful, which is all you need to make a really good soup. Is the soup going to be anywhere near this caliber? Perhaps, if you cook it with care in the future. I hope in season 4 they figure out how to balance such an ensemble cast a little less messily so that the soup stays in the pot this time instead of spilling everywhere. I really do love all of these characters and would like them to be given some room to breathe rather than watching a 7-hour-long montage of super short clips mashed together. And that's all I have today, folks. Thanks for listening to me talk your ears off about literally the most unserious show on the planet. If you liked me rambling about a show that is nothing but ballrooms and gowns and unemployed rich people being hoes, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts on season 3 down below. I'll see y'all next time. Bye!